Welcome back, everybody, to Who's Your Band. Today on Who's Your Band, first off, as always, let's say hello to Mr. Sean Morton, my co-host. How are you, Sean?
You know, Jeffrey, the beautiful thing, I just took my glasses off. I don't know if you really know this about me, but I do wear contacts. So when I don't have my glasses on, I'm basically like Stevie Wonder. I can't see a goddamn thing. So right now you are completely blurry, and this is the best you've ever looked.
Yes, blurry is my best side. That's what I've been told.
I'll put them on. There we go.
Okay.
Much
All
better.
right. Let's introduce our guest today, because our guest is not only a comedian, he's an actor. It is the one and the only, the handsome Mr. Bob DiBuono. Give it up for Bob.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for being here.
How are you, Bob?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing okay, just taking day by day, I guess, right? It's weird, We're not really, it's like, got to be creative now to work and make money, and just a strange time, right?
It is a strange time, and we've been trying to get you on the show for a little bit, because you've been pretty busy, actually. Tell us what you've been up to, man. What you've been up to? What's been going on with you?
Yeah, pretty grateful that when all the when the comedy stopped last March, and there was just no clubs and everything was shutting down. There was still all these private events that I was able to do Trump. So like stuff around the country, because he was running, and it was like, that was like a big thing. I was getting all these great projects, everything. And on both sides, like right and left. Like one weekend I was at the Georgia Boat Parade, and they're all like staunch Republicans, and they want Trump to be out there talking to like 500 boats on the water. And then the next week I'm with YG doing a music video, and that can't be an audience that, can't be any more anti-Trump. Of course, he's known for "Fuck Donald Trump," that song. So it's just all these really cool projects, and that kept me afloat, thankfully.
And what are you seeing as you're traveling across the country? Were people, did they like the impression? Were they kind of like giving you a hard time? Did you ever get any backlash from it?
Yeah, a lot of backlash. Like doing a character, I guess I liken it to, if you guys can think of any actor that played a very controversial character in a movie, where people would go to that movie and be almost angry at the actor for playing that character. That's really what that is. I kind of think about Mel Gibson doing that movie about Jesus. He got a lot of backlash for that, just even touching that topic.
The Christ movie?
Yeah. And then that's just someone who, he directed that movie, correct? And then you have other people that have played characters that, it's almost like being asked to play Hitler in a movie. And people are like, why would you promote Hitler? And you're like, I'm not. I'm an artist, and I'm being asked to play a character to educate people, whether you like them or not. I'm just playing a character to educate people that this is a time piece of a person that existed in our world at some time, and he had an impact. And that's kind of how it is with Donald Trump. I'm not really a political comedian. Anyone who knows me knows I'm far from political. And when I started doing this character, I was doing it on Comedy Central on the nightly show, which couldn't be any more liberal. And then that show went off the air, and then I did stuff like
Wilburn show, right? Larry Wilburn show. The Larry Wilbur show.
Wilmore, yeah.
Wilmore.
And then right when that show went off the air, that was right before the election. And then Trump wins, and everyone's like, oh my God, that show would have been so great if it stayed on the air, because now Trump's president, and now every week you have this great fodder. So then I'm like, well, my phone's going to ring off the hook. I'm going to get all these calls to do Trump on TV, SNL and all these different shows. And nobody called me, because I realized after a few months that late night TV, being very liberal, were so angry. There's such a hangover that Trump won, that they didn't want to make Trump funny. They didn't want to bring someone on and make it light. They wanted to kind of demonize him because they hated him. So if you notice, a lot of these late night shows, they'll do the impression themselves. Colbert or Fallon or Kimmel will take like a call in. So I was kind of depressed. I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this character. It's so hot. And none of these late night shows, which is where I belong, wants to put him on because he's president now. So anyway, even though that happened and nothing happened on that end, like I got on CNN and I got to do The View, and then I got to do the voice of Trump on Murphy Brown on CBS. And those were all very, very liberal. Did Mika and Joe Scarborough's engagement party. Toured with Kendrick Lamar for a month with rapper YG, all very liberal. And then on top of it, I'm going around the country doing pro-Trump events where these people worship Trump and they want me to go up there and do like a rally as Trump. So it's been great, but people get offended no matter what I do. If I put up a video where I'm doing Trump, someone's going to go, "Oh my God, I guess he likes Trump because he's playing Trump, F you." And then if I do something that's Trump making fun of Joe Biden, now it's like, "Oh my God, he hates Joe Biden." It's like, no, I'm just doing what Trump would do. It's just a character.
You ever fuck up and do like your pro-Trump thing at like at a liberal event?
Yeah. I mean, even like I'll do a video for somebody. Like I do these cameo videos, and I'll do a joke.
I saw you pop up on that. I was like, all right, he's making some coin doing that. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully, like that, the cameo has like helped me survive the last couple of months. And I was referred by Elon Gold because I was doing Elon Gold's show on his live podcast on Instagram, and I'll do Trump on there. And then someone who loves Trump will go, "Oh my God, I can't believe you made that joke about Melania. He's our president. How dare you? He's our president. She's the first lady." It's like, he's not the Pope. It's like, are you an idiot? Like, he's just a human being. And that's what comedians do. We find fodder in everything. And we make fun of everything around us. That's what we are. We're sponges, right? We're constantly grabbing information, ideas, thoughts, observations, and then we put it back out there. We regurgitate it through our own persona. And it's like they can't handle it. So I'll have people that are pro-Trump get mad that I make a joke where they think I'm making fun of Trump. And then I did an art gallery in LA where they put me in a fake jail cell with real rats. It made like page 3 of the Daily News the next day. And I had girls yelling at me, crying, saying, "You're a rapist. I'm a rapist. You're a rapist. You're a rapist. Trump's a rapist." I'm dressed in orange. I have a wig on. I'm a short Italian guy. And I'm a rapist because I'm dressed as Donald Trump. They didn't even get it. Like it's a satire. So.
And these are the people that are voting.
On the right and the left. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, on the right and left, people are driven by emotion. And I tell people it's kind of like if you have a friend and he's married and you really don't know the wife, and the friend calls you every day and he just shits on his wife. Well, you would have a very negative impression of his wife. Why? Because your loyalties and allegiance is with your friend. And that's kind of how it is in the world we live in. If there's a news network that you watch and it plays into your emotions and your feelings, then you're going to be loyal to it, whether they're right or wrong, or it's someone that you're voting for. It's disgusting. It's kind of sad. People don't work on logic anymore. It's just pure emotion.
I don't think there are any more real news networks.
No.
I think they're all op-ed. I think they're all opinion-based.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone reports the news straight out. What are you saying, Sean? Go ahead.
What I was saying was, it's kind of what Bob was saying, how you don't have, you have that allegiance to somebody, but I've never met Jeff's wife, yet I have allegiance to her because I know how much of an asshole.
You know how much of a jerk Jeff is.
Right.
Yeah. It's
so
the
opposite.
Your allegiance is toward her because you know Jeff, and that and therefore you're siding with her. I get it. Yeah.
Exactly. Right away, I know she has her eyesight is bad. She's no sense of smell. It's no standards and none of that. So, which is great.
Why do I have to smell? In this scenario, why do I have to smell?
It's cold going to the rule of three, Jeff.
You and your stupid delayed internet today. He moved to a different room.
Here's an example of emotion. So YG's manager calls me. They go, "Do you want to go on tour with YG?" I have no idea who YG is. I didn't know who Kendrick Lamar was. 2017. I'm just not up on hip hop. And next thing I know, I'm like, I got to do it because you never know what could come from it. So now
how long were you out with them for?
3.5 weeks, living on a bus, 6 buses, 4 for Kendrick, 2 for YG, living on a bus with YG and a lot of his friends from Compton. So I'm thinking who's
Bob DiBuono. And Bob DiBuono.
So they're like, YG. I go, who's that? They go, oh, it stands for Young Gangster. I go, oh God, another wannabe tough guy that some music company is getting behind to market him as like tough, badass. He's street. So I go out there and I have no idea who is, and I show up and I get to the bus, San Jose, first show. I show up in an Uber. I got my little duffel bag, and there's a bus, and we're going on in 3 hours. And there's like 30 guys outside that look like they're all from lockup. And I'm like, oh, okay. And they're like, yeah, this is I thought I was at the wrong bus. I go, this must be the wrong bus. And they go, no, that's the bus. And I go in, and I learn within an hour that YG is a Bloods gang member from Compton. And these are all of his friends that are Bloods members. And he's been shot, and his friends have been shot, and he's got friends in jail. And I'm like, wow, this guy is like the real deal. So I didn't know this, and now I got to live on a bus with 3.5 weeks with these guys. And they didn't, the fact that I was doing Donald Trump, they didn't like the fact that I was doing Donald Trump. They couldn't even separate me when I was not in the makeup. When I was out of the makeup, they'd be like, yo, fuck Trump, yo, fuck Trump. We're going to put a cap in your ass, motherfucker. And you're like, dude, like, it's just, I'm Bob, just a guy from New Jersey. I'm not him. I'm just living with you guys.
No, fuck that, Bob. You should have stood up for yourself.
As Trump.
Yeah, as Trump. You go and get right in their face. You don't back down. You don't take that shit.
I know you blacks are going to vote for me. I'm just worried about you being 3 hours late to the polls. That's what I'm worried about. So it was great. But after the 3.5 weeks, so I'm living on their terms. I'm like, I go to bed when they go to bed. You're living on a bus with 2 strippers, YG's rapper buddies, and then they're all their friends. And it's like,
how weird is that? Totally
weird. And then there's like 2 white guys that are like roadies, that are like grizzled roadies. They look like pirates. They've been doing it for 20 years, and they just go in their little, they're lay in their bed with their headphones on and just like ignore everybody. So nobody talked to me for 3.5 weeks. Nobody took like.
How did you get this gig?
They reached out. I guess they saw me maybe on the nightly show and then they emailed me and they were like, do you want to, do a tour for 3 weeks, sold out, 30,000 people in arenas?
Was YG and Kendrick Lamar good to you?
Yeah. So they're like friends. They come up from Compton, and Kendrick Lamar couldn't be he's a very clean cut guy. He's a very small guy, very clean cut, doesn't drink, doesn't drug. And then YG, is a partier. And YG is, from the streets, and I didn't know these guys, and they weren't really friendly to me. But then by the end of the 3 weeks, they respected me, because even the manager, who was a white guy, was like, I can't believe you came out here to live on a bus for 3.5 weeks. Like, this is like brutal living. Like, you do a show all night. We're driving to the next city, 8-10 hours. You're living on a bus. If you wanted to go to the bathroom, you had to ask the bus driver to stop the bus. And I was like, I stopped eating, because I was like, I'm not going to be the guy that stop the bus in the middle of the night. These guys are going to freaking kill me. So I stopped eating because I didn't want to take a shit. And it was like, it was so brutal. But by the end of it, then I went back to do Coachella, and they were so excited to see me. It was like the wall came down. I got to know them, and I started to respect them and where they come from, and they respected me. And at the end, we're just guys, human beings. And all those certain stigmas that we had about each other were taken away. So,
what'd you do on the tour?
I would walk out every night as Trump for about 2.5, 3 minutes on stage in the middle of the concert and do Trump like he was at a rally and start insulting the audience. Look at all these. I was in San Jose. Like, look at all these Mexican women. I'm going to be groping so many pussies tonight. It's going to be unbelievable. And look at the Mexicans. Many of you. Then they're all like booing, boo. And I'm like, you're going to be thrown out of the country very quickly. So enjoy it tonight, because you'll be thrown out. I can't wait to throw you out. You're horrible. Many of you are probably in jail, right? You belong in jail. So I was just saying horrible things. And YG's like, say whatever you want. Just piss them off, like whatever stuff you got. So I was just saying really just terrible things about them. You're all illegal. You're going to get thrown out of the country. I'm building a wall. Don't worry if you're gay. I'm going to put a glory hole right in the middle of it for you little faggots, like just unloading on them.
So in the middle of this concert, you have this YG concert. Here comes the music would stop, and you just come on stage just in full.
Goes black. Yeah, stage goes black, and I walk out, and they can just there's like a spotlight on me, and they see a silhouette of me as Trump, and they see the hat and the wig, and I'm wearing like 30 shirts. I'm bulking up to look like Trump, and as soon as I walk out there and the light comes on me, the crowd goes nuts, and it's like a WWE wrestling match. It's like
you're the heel, right? You're being booed every single night,
and I'll send you guys the videos. It's whole and. Like at Coachella, 80,000 people, 80,000. And you walk out and it looked like Woodstock and people are booing. It's like a cacophony of booing, laughing, and cheering at the same time, all in one. Because they all get it. Like they know the song's coming, fuck Donald Trump. So now they're excited, like, oh, there's the bad guy. We'll all go crazy. But then you still had people on the tour that were really hard gangster, gangbangers, that would see me, they didn't get the joke. Like they would see me as Trump and they'd be like, yo, you're going to catch a bullet tonight, motherfucker. And you're like,
and they would be real.
Yeah. And I'm like, dude, like we're making fun of him. Did you not get it? Yo, you're going to die tonight, motherfucker. You're going to get shot, mother. And it's like, they're dumb as dumb. Like they just don't. The dumbest people in the world, like just dumb.
Did they ever blow your mind if like one of them would walk up with like, the white guinea tee dripping with fucking gold, the hat on backwards, walk up to you and go, yo, let me ask you a question, motherfucker.
Yeah.
What do you think of the socioeconomic development in post-communist Russia? Do you think that, what's your opinion on that?
That would freak me out.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, like when we did the tour, we started in San Jose, Sacramento, Nebraska, Chicago, American Airlines Arena in Miami. I mean, we did the biggest arenas, and I would say 95% of the people in the audience were amazing. Like I would walk out in between, they'd have a break before Kendrick Lamar, and people were coming down from the rafters to line up to get pictures with me. I mean, I was like a little hero, whether they liked me or hated Trump, it didn't matter. It was like, oh, I got to get a picture with Trump. He came out during the concert, and it was cool. It was great, So I had nothing but it was the hardest 3.5 weeks of living in my life because you lived on a bus. You never really ate right. You never could take a shit. No one really talked to you. YG's bodyguard was always trying to get me to do Fight Club in the locker room with him. That's what they would do. He would perform YG, and then they would go into the green room. There'd be like 30 people in there smoking, drinking, and then they would have like Fight Club where YG would just like take on all of his friends in the room and like slap box with them.
Could he fight?
Huh?
Could he fight? Can YG fight?
He's not a fighter, but he's from the streets. So
was he good?
Him and his buddies would just go out there and just beat the shit out of it. So I'm a white guy. I don't know, guy. I was like, white. The first time I saw it happen, I was like, someone's got to break this shit up. Like, what the people are knocking over tables, and one of his buddies, his nose is bleeding. I'm like, why isn't anyone stopping this? And they're like, no, we do this all the time. And I was like, oh, you see, we don't do that. Where I grew up, you don't do that because if you get in a fight, it's like to the death. Like, I don't fight with my friends where we're like smacking each other in the face, like unless we had pads on, or we're rolling and wrestling, but. They would go at it. And then, and then I made the mistake of like his bodyguard was always messing with me. And he was like, this 250-pound Jack Diesel, angry guy. And he hates Trump. And he never would smile at me. And he'd be like, fuck you, nigga, fuck you. And he was always like trying to start shit with me, but he couldn't beat the shit out of me because he knew I had to go on stage every night and do Trump. So that was the only thing that kept me from getting killed.
Now, Bob, what you should have done, you should have educated him.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the funny part was in the beginning, like he hated me. And then I went out to do Coachella and then I went out to do recently to do a video for YG. And he's like my buddy. It's like all of that shit came down, all of the ego, the alpha male shit came down with both of us. So happy ending.
You know what the thing? I know you're known for your Trump, but man, you do great impressions. I saw you do, I don't know if you ever seen it, Sean. Bob does an amazing Rich Voss.
No, I've never seen that.
Oh,
Bob, do you remember you were on that roast?
Yeah, I do.
And
So I did.
I
had the hat backwards, and I was like, "Okay, loosen up. I should date this homeless woman. That was great. When I was done having sex with her, I could drop her off anywhere. We're home. Loosen up. I got more credits than anybody."
But besides, but your impressions are great. But the material, even with the Trump and the voice and other voices you do, the material that goes along with it are just as good.
Well, I think that's key. You know, when you talk to people that do voices, I think that's the full. I always tell people it's like the full package. It's great if you could do a voice, but if you can write material for the voice that's funny, then it's a hit. Because like there's guys that do you could do an impression on stage, and I can do a great impression on stage, and people go, "Wow, it's a really good voice." But if there's no material to drive the voice, well, then people go, then it's a dud. And so I remember early on, I would do impressions, but I would just do a line or a sentence of that voice, and people were like, they wanted more. They're like, "Oh, that's great, but give me more. Give me a situation. Do something funny with it." And so then you have to write for the character. And some guys, they do the voice, they don't write the material for it. And I always realize that that's so important. So
it really is. Now I think you have a great everyman's voice. Have you done any voiceover work?
Yes, I have. Yeah. I did voiceover work for Spike TV. That was the first thing I ever got. I did Spike. It was 12 years ago. I was the voice for a whole campaign on Spike TV called, it was something like some show that they were doing. And it was me, Judah Friedlander, and Mike Britt. And we did this whole commercial campaign, and it was great. And that voice over landed me my agent with Innovative. And so I was able to build a reel by doing these non-union voiceovers. And, the guy at Spike kind of took to me, and he brought me in a couple of times to do VOs for them. And that was exactly what he said. You're kind of like the everyday guy, voice. And that helps.
You don't have the Morgan Freeman type voice, the DJ voice, no. but you have that, again, like I said, that every man's voice, very relatable, and in your whole persona, on stage and everything, is also very relatable. Like people would want to be your pal. And you could see that in your acting roles, especially in some of the commercials I've seen you in. And one commercial that stands out, Sean, I don't know if you ever seen Bob. He played a guy with gas in one of these commercials.
Yeah. That's the only commercial that my ex-girlfriends saw nationally on TV. So I was always like, "Oh, my ex-girlfriends, they'll really be jealous, They'll be upset they broke up with me. Wait till they see me on TV." And I did all these little spots, and no one ever saw them. And then the one national, the big national the first big national was the gas commercial. And that everybody saw that. And then I was thinking all my ex-girlfriends were like, "Oh, look at, he's still shitting his pants." Slob. Still a slob, I remember.
What'd you do before comedy?
I did comedy for the first time in my life when I was 16 in a church variety show. All my own material. And I thought I was so funny, and I bombed. They hated me. And I thought I was so good. And I used to love Gary Shandling. That was my inspiration as a kid. Gary Shandling was my first, him and David Brenner. And these just funny, quirky guys. And then I never did it again after that. I was almost scarred for life. I was like, "Oh my God, I bombed. They hated me." And I did 25 minutes. I was probably funnier then than I was now. And then years later, I started up again. But in between that, I was doing what I thought I should do, which is what many parents want you to do. You got to get the job, get security. And my dad was a real corporate guy. So he was always like, "There are so many comedians out there. It is so hard for you to make it. The odds are against you. Okay? You better get a real job." So I was like, "Oh, I better." My dad scared the hell out of me because, you always want your dad's approval. So I went out and got the job, and I was an advertising major, and I worked in advertising, and then I was a sales guy.
Who'd you work for in advertising?
I worked for Y&R.
Oh, sure. Young and Rubicam.
Yeah. And then I was there during back when they were spiking the nicotine levels of Parliament Lights. And back when that movie came out in 92 with Al Pacino called The Insider. I was in the middle of that working for Y&R, and our client was Philip Morris. And I'd work like 14 hours a day. It was horrible. And I'm like, I don't even smoke. And I'm working with this company. It's so corrupt. And we're defending a company doing like a corporate campaign to try to make them look good. Meanwhile, they're like criminals. They want people to get addicted to cigarettes.
How'd you make the leap from having a secure job, probably making good money at Y&R, to taking the risk? And, comics at the beginning make shit. So, like, how did you want, was there a time where did you work both, or just say, I've had enough?
I think, like many of us, you have that inner conflict where you always wanted to do this thing. You have this voice inside you that's pushing you to want to go and try this, this art. But then the other part of me was the fear talking, and of course, a very alpha male father that was like, he didn't believe in me. He was like, it's never going to happen. But luckily I had a mom who to this day is my biggest supporter. She was always like, she's a very artistic woman. She's a teacher. And she was like, you need to follow your dream, and you need to follow your passion, and you could always have a day job, and you can always make money, but money should never define you. And if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't have done comedy, because I didn't really have enough confidence in myself to do it. And so she was kind of like, no, go ahead, if you hate your job, quit your job, go do comedy and see what happens. And that after 9/11, I'm like, you know what? I gotta just go for it. I can't stop playing it safe. You can't play life safe, because there's no guarantee, right? Every day is not guaranteed. So I was like, I'm just gonna take my shot. And it was scary as hell. And I remember my dad thought I was nuts. And I remember my dad telling me he was embarrassed that I was waitering because I gave up this day job. And of course I was like, yeah, I feel like this is a total stupid move, but I have to try it. And knock on wood, I don't know, 16, 17 years later, I'm still doing comedy, and I'm not, having to go back. But I still have that voice. I don't know if you guys have it, where you're always like, every day I wake up in a panic. Like, it's like Joan Rivers used to say, my biggest fear is when this phone stops ringing. And that's kind of like what it is to be an artist. Like, no matter what we do, if we have a day job or don't, the fear is, what if the phone stops ringing and no one wants to hire me again? And I still have that every day.
I did that for about 19 years of my life. I used to go on tour with bands.
Yeah.
And, you'd work, and you'd be working for months, and you'd make great money. And then you come home and you're like, I don't know how to plan, like, what I'm going to do within next week. I don't know what I'm going to do within 2 weeks. I don't know if I can never get a phone call again, or I can get home, get a phone call, and I'll go out for another, 6 months, Right. So I totally get what you're talking about. Bob is you're like one of the best people in comedy to talk to, because you're such a smart guy, and you're very like real. And especially early on with me when I first started, you gave me always such great advice. And
I told you to quit. What are you talking about?
Thank God, Bob.
I know it was.
I said, you're smart. Quit. Like, I'm going to quit. Let's all quit.
Yes.
That's stupid.
Yes. The first night I met you, you did yell at me.
You did our show or something, right?
You beat me down really, but no, you're always very, very, very nice to me. Always very, very nice to me, and always very supportive. I'll never forget that. So let's talk a little bit music, okay?
Yes.
Because the name of the show is Who's Your Band, and I love the band that you picked, and you're a big Van Halen guy, right?
Yeah.
How'd you get into Van Halen? Let's talk about that.
I will, when you're young, and I think when I was a kid, I was really I didn't really have much exposure to music. I remember, I would hear most of my music on the bus going to school, like in junior high. Like, I think that's when I started, I think in 7th grade, when I really started listening to music. And it was my first forays into music were hearing the music being played on a boombox in the back of the bus by other guys that were older than me.
Is this in New Jersey?
No, Danbury, Connecticut.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, an hour and 15 minutes out of the city. And of course, back then when you're younger, and I remember 7th grade and you're on a bus, you're, if you were in the front of the bus, you were kind of like a nerd. and the middle of the bus, you were kind of like a regular guy. And then the back of the bus were the druggies and like the punks and the bullies. So I was right. Is that where you were? Were you in the back?
Yeah. I was in the back.
I was like, I didn't have the guys in the back that were bullies didn't like me. We would, you'd go on a route in our block. The other block didn't like our block, and we didn't have any tough people on our block. So there was no one to defend and protect me. So I couldn't sit in the back because the back had all the other tough guys from the other block who hated us. So
that's what got you ready to go out on the road with the Bloods.
What's that? Right.
That's what got you. So let me ask you: you're listening to music on the back of a bus, and you're in the rough and tumble neighborhood of Connecticut somewhere, the
hood.
Who did you grow up listening to?
So I grew up. I started with the Rolling Stones. That was like a first band I ever remember listening to, and before that, it was probably Dr. Hook. I mean, I was like in grammar school listening to like 70s.
Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show.
Yeah, it was like. I remember like hearing 70s music when I was a kid. And then my first exposure to rock was the Rolling Stones in 7th grade. That was the first t-shirt I ever bought. And then I'm on the bus and I'm hearing Jamie's Crying. I'm hearing You Really Got Me. And I'm hearing Running with the Devil. And I'm like, oh my God, like this band is so hard. The guitar is so like, it just encompass all the feelings you're feeling when you're 13 years old and 14. You're going through puberty. Your penis is growing. You're getting pubic hair. You're like starting to get like alpha male, like testosterone. You're playing football with your friends. I'm like, this speaks about like what we're feeling. This is like the soundtrack of what my feelings are. I'm horny. I'm angry. I want to punch my friend in the arm. This is great. And that was my first beginning to hearing Van Halen. And that was the first probably album, maybe the second album I ever bought other than the Rolling Stones. And then I started to worship them. I mean, it was literally like, buying Circus magazines, couldn't wait for Circus to come out. And back then, that was when they were in their heyday. So we're talking like 1981, 82.
Right, because the album that you just mentioned, everything you mentioned was just off of Van Halen 1, and that came out in 78.
Right.
And then the next year they came out with Van Halen 2 with, the big hit Dance the Night Away, Beautiful Girls, and then like you're off to the races, and they come out with 4 more after that.
Yeah. It was like,
Were you a bit more of a Sammy guy or a Dave guy?
No, David Lee Roth. Yeah. See,
I'm the opposite.
Huh? Opposite?
I'm the opposite.
So here's the thing. As I've gotten older, as I've gotten older, I've really been able to, I cut it up differently and I look at it with different approaches. Musically, Sammy Hagar was a much better fit for Van Halen. And I can say that now that I'm older. I couldn't admit that, or I didn't even see it when I was younger. But musically, Sammy Hagar, way more versatile, a much greater singer, much better range. And his style lends itself to Van Halen because Van Halen became, they were a hard rock group or like a rock band, but then they also, they got into keyboards and they got to piano and they really, got more diversified, and that played itself into Sammy Hagar's talents. Whereas David Lee Roth is really showman first, singer second, right? We can all agree. I mean, he really, on the early albums, David Lee Roth had a great voice for the music that Van Halen was playing. I don't think David Lee Roth, his voice could lend itself to the music once it got to be more diversified with keyboards. It just wasn't the same. I didn't think he had that range, but I love Dave because I love the showman in him. There was something that David Lee Roth, aside from Sammy, the showman, I've never seen anyone like this guy. I remember first seeing him. I'll tell you the video if you've never watched it. What made me fall in love with Van Halen was the first video I ever saw was Hear About It Later, 1981, live in Oakland Coliseum. It's on YouTube. They played 3 songs, Unchained, Hear About It Later, and So This Is Love. And I was like, oh my God, this guy, David Lee Roth, larger than life. He back then in that tour, he dressed like he was like an Indian. He'd wear these like high moccasins, these like tight leopard or tight pants with the stripe down the side. He had like 8,000 bandanas on. He had the long blonde hair. I had the biggest male crush on David Lee Roth. I had pictures of Van Halen all over my walls from Circus Magazine. I had a huge picture of David Lee Roth with no shirt on, sitting by a pool. And I remember my dad didn't know who he was. Like, what are you gay? What are you gay? Who's this David Lee Halen? Why don't you get him off your wall? And I had all these pictures of David Lee Roth doing splits and jumping around, and the wall was covered. And I had this male crush on David Lee Roth. It was like this guy. It's like not a crush like I'm gay, I want to have sex with you. It's this guy, I want to be this guy. Right. This guy, because he was something about him that was so
everybody
effeminate.
Wanted to be David Lee Roth.
He was like he was all these things in one. A wild, like Apache Indian on stage. He was also very girly. The way he would move on stage was very effeminate. And so there's something about it. He almost looked like a woman to me. He wasn't even a man. He was like this really attractive woman who did all these cool things. And I was conflicted because I was just starting to masturbate. I was like, I can't masturbate over David Lee Roth. But it was unbelievable. The physicality on stage was nuts. The splits and the jumping. And if you watch that video, quintessential David Lee. Did you ever see the video? Hear about it later with David Lee Roth? Yeah,
I've seen almost everything Van Halen puts. I'm like you, love David Lee Roth. Here's the thing with David Lee Roth. Everyone kind of like does shit on him a little bit about his singing ability, and you forget about him when he first came out. I mean, he lost a lot as he got older. He's not the singer that Sammy is. But if you listen, just like to the phrasing in a song like "Little Dreamer," like the little stank he puts on the lyrics. I mean, I can't see anyone else singing it. And, Sammy, when he comes into the band, was a little intimidated singing some of the Roth songs.
Yeah.
Only a couple songs he would do. Can you see anybody else doing a song like "On the Cradle Will Rock," "Mean Streets," "Unchained"? I mean, I think the Roth era had more songs. I think the Sammy era had a couple of like the better songs. Like I think a song like "Right Now" is like their best work. It's so good. And this is the genius of Eddie Van Halen. He had that in his pocket for years. In fact, it was used. Just the music was used as the bed in a movie. Right. And then they put lyrics because he didn't think it was going to be good enough. Yeah.
And that's the thing about. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and then when they get Sammy, we had a guy on the show who was the original first choice to take over for Dave. It was a guy named Mitch Malloy who was offered the job to be the singer, and then he told the story about how they got together for the MTV Music Awards. Right. But even prior to that, they didn't even want to go with one singer. Did you know that they wanted to do what's his name, Daryl Hall, Pat Smythe, Jeanette Napolitano from Concrete Blonde. They wanted to put out an album with all different singers so they could explore all these different genres of music that they wanted to go with.
Yeah. Yes, they did. Yeah. My first loyalty will always be Van Halen with David Lee Roth. I think musically they did a lot of creative things with Sammy, and I think Sammy's a very talented guy. But my loyalties and allegiance was always with David Lee Roth because he, to me, was a summation of what Van Halen was, which was like raw, hard party band, and he was the greatest ringleader of a circus. He was this ringleader. And in the songs that you're talking about, when he sings, it was not even the voice. He had this texture to his voice. Like I loved him. He has a great voice in Little Guitars, in Diver Down. Like he could sing, and he wanted to sing, he could sing.
That's the album I hate the most with him. By the way,
I agree with you too. That was probably more of the commercial stuff. But
All
I
covers.
love like his voice in that song sounds really good. Like he really hits his notes. But the early stuff, it was just so raw, and it was more of the personality behind the voice as so much too as the voice. You didn't care that he hit a note the way he hit it. You're not thinking about that when you're young. You're just thinking about the guitar and this really like alpha male raw voice that he had. And I used to love the little things he would do. Like when you listen to the songs and you get to like the end of a song, like Cradle Will Rock, and like the little things he would do, he would just put in there, like little words he'd yell out, or like little, sounds like an or just like at the end of Cradle Will Rock, he goes on and on and on and on. You hear that at the end? The song would fade out. This is what I used to love about all songs, but especially Van Halen. A song would fade out. It's over. But then I would turn it all the way up, and you could hear some of the shit that no one ever heard because they thought the song was over. But if you turn, the song's going down, it's going down, but then you hear David going, saying something like, but he'll come out with a couple of words, or he'll be talking to Eddie, or he'll just yell out something, and you're like, oh my God, I never heard that because I never listened to that part that closely at the end.
See, I have a weird relationship with Van Halen because I'm like an 80s MTV baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I was exposed to Van Halen, it was really during the 1984 album.
Jump. Yep.
So here, Jump. So then all of a sudden I'm like, all right, this is what this band sounds like. And then I remember seeing that the lead singer gets, leaves the band. So now I'm watching, California Girls and watching him do all this kind of shtick. And I'm like, okay, so I don't have the ability to go back and listen to them because I'm 8 years old at this point. And then I hear them doing like Yankee Rose. So I'm like, all right, this is fantastic. This guy's a great singer. This guitar player's nuts. Yeah. And then I see Van Halen has this new singer, and I'm like, all right. So I remember Sammy Hagar from I Can't Drive 55, from the Winner Takes It All, from the Over the Top soundtrack. I remember all that shit. Yeah. And now I hear that Van Halen. So I automatically gravitated towards the Sammy Hagar, Van Halen. But when I got older, obviously, and you have the ability to have a little money in your pocket and you go backwards and you hear it, I mean, just two totally different bands.
Totally. Yeah.
Totally different bands. But, I think Jeff even said it too. I just prefer Sammy because I think some of the songs are better. Right now, Dreams When It's Over, Finish What You Started. I mean, those are some of the best rock songs, but you cannot ever discount how amazing David Lee Roth is as a front man. He's a top 5 front man of all time, Yeah. Again, not the greatest singer in the world, but he fit that version of the band perfectly.
Yeah. It's like if it was a party, it's like with Sammy Hagar, there was more food on the table. And with David Lee Roth, they only had a few hot dogs and hamburgers, but that was the greatest party I've ever been to. It's just like he was limited, but the showmanship alone for me, it was all visual for me. It was all visual stimulation with David Lee Roth. It was just the personality and just in the songs. And that's what I was saying. Like at the end of songs, did you ever like listen to the end when he would just yell out things like in Cradle Will Rock? I just remember like, he would go at the end, he goes on and on and on. And then he goes, "Wah!" Just that, "Wah!" Go back and listen to that. On and on. "Wah!" You're like, what the frick is that?
I think the part in Cradle Will Rock that everyone likes is that little break when it's the producer, Ted Templeton, goes, "Come on, Dave, give us a break." And then Dave, one
that was
break coming up, and then it just kicks back in. And that's great. Do you have a particular song, like a favorite Van Halen song?
Yeah, of all time, it would probably be Hear About It Later. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And you wouldn't think that because there's so many big hits with David Lee Roth.
Yeah, I think something like Mean Street, because that I could see you like digging that, like that, especially that beginning riff at the guitar players are intimidated to play that.
Yeah,
you can't cut.
I think that whole album, like Unchained, Mean Street, Hear About It Later.
That's all off a Fair Warning.
Yeah, and those are all great. But I think Hear About It Later because I saw the video with that song before I ever saw anything else. the video is so fun to watch. David Lee Roth in his prime. And I love, we'll hear about it later. It starts off with the guitar and it's very slow, melodic. And then it breaks into that very hard, dark guitar. And he's playing, it's like layered. The guitar is layered. So he's doing one thing and he's also playing on a pedal that keeps the other part playing along with it. And it's really great. And then at the end, I don't know if you ever hear the ending of Hear About It Later, but he's doing all of this, this guitar licks that a lot of people don't even pay attention to. Like, I can listen to Eddie Van Halen and find so many different licks where I'm like, oh my God, I just heard him do this thing. And it was like a second. You guys ever notice that with like a Van Halen song?
100%. In fact, I kind of equate it to like watching a Coppola movie. When you watch The Godfather, like for the 50th time, and you're like, oh, I never picked up on that. The same thing with listening to Van Halen. You're like, oh, I never heard that before. I never realized that before.
Like,
what are you saying, Sean?
You said you didn't like Diver Down, right?
No, because you know what? It's a lot of covers. I hated Dancing in the Streets. I wasn't a big fan of it. I mean, I think my favorite song off of it is the instrumental, The Intruder, is what I like. Into Pretty Woman.
I really liked my favorite song off that would be Hang 'Em High. I mean, the guitar, I think in Hang 'Em High, that's a great song. Put it on and you can listen for every little tiny short little lick where Eddie is in between playing those chords, is just going into like a little thing where he's just going off on a tangent for a second. It's unbelievable.
No, I hate that song. I hate it.
Which one?
Big Bad Bill, Sweet William Now? No, it's too tongue in cheek. I don't like it. And I think that was the whole thing with Diver Down, that it was a rush put together album. The studio made him kind of put it together. They just wanted to put out a cover of Dancing in the Streets, and Warner Brothers made them put this album together. So that's why it's mostly it's like really like things that would have been B-sides and covers and instrumentals. It's not a real complete album. I think it comes in at around 33 minutes as well.
Yeah, I agree. There were some of the songs on there, they were good. I mean, the first song that was the first album I ever bought was Diver Down. And I remember hearing the first song, which was Where Have All the Good Times Gone? I didn't know it was a cover. And the guitar was so fun. And I just remember the guitar solo in the middle where it's like, wee, wee. It was like with the guitar was just like whistling. And I was like, oh my God. And then I remember I had the giant, their concert book that I bought off my friend because I didn't go to the concert. And I used to look at the book, this giant, and Eddie looked so cool with the white knickers and the red striped shirt. And Alex Van Halen was matching with these, with a blue and black like striped shirt with the long knee socks. They were like so cool to me. But you agree, that album was so weak, and I hated covers because they were so wimpy to me. It was like, this is wimpy, like these wimpy songs, you're redoing. I hated that. I hated Pretty Woman. Oh, I couldn't stand that.
I never liked that either.
I didn't like it either.
I can remember the guitar licks by Eddie Van Halen in a song where I would play it, my friends wouldn't even pick up on it. I could hear about it later at the end. It's like closing out the song. And he goes, and David Lee Roth's like, I don't wanna, and he's just like, he's kind of like improvising. I don't want. He's just yelling out things, and the guitar is just playing at the end. And there's one part where Eddie Van Halen, you just hear him go like that. He just does this really quick thing with his fingers, and it's like the coolest thing. And if you hear it in your headphones, you're like, holy shit, where'd that come from?
Did you have a favorite album?
I remember hearing Pound Cake when it was on the radio when that came out.
Great.
And I'm listening to it. I'm like, because I was just starting to play guitar at that point, and I'm like, does he have a drill on his guitar? It sounds like a drill. And then you watch the video, drill. The MTV Music Awards, and he's playing a fucking drill. I mean, people don't, with him passing, people take a step back and they go, wow, he really was, just a great guitar player. He was one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize it's not just all about the speed. It's about the little intricacies that he did playing the guitar.
He invented tapping, Sean.
Right.
Of course he did.
And no one tapped before him.
I know. I mean, it's an odd thing. Some people do believe that people did it beforehand, but he did invent it. There's no
And
question.
it's funny, and when you see anything that's brilliant in life, whether it's art or a guitarist or a guy who makes pottery or a guy who's directing a movie, when something's brilliant, it's so amazing that a normal person can't even wrap their head around how good you have to be able to do it. People take brilliant people for granted. I mean, Eddie Van Halen's like, oh yeah, they just go, oh, he's great because he was in a band that was famous. It's like they don't understand that this guy was an architect, a craftsman that was unlike any other guitarist, before or after him. He's a legend. And to be a legend, you have to be a pioneer. And people don't appreciate the pioneering because they don't know what it takes to go from point A to point B to point C to point D, to take it places that it never went before. They'll never appreciate it unless you play the guitar and you go, oh my God, I could never do that.
One of my favorite stories about Eddie, when Dimebag Darrell had died. I don't know if you know who he is from Pantera.
Yeah, Pantera.
And Van Halen was his be all and end all. He always credits in saying that Van Halen too is the reason why he picked up the guitar. And they became really good friends. And when Dime was shot and killed, Eddie actually buried him with the Bumblebee guitar from Van Halen too.
No kidding. It's Van Halen too.
Yeah, he placed it in the casket and says the greatest should have his greatest guitar with him. And he wound up burying the actual one with him in there.
Wow.
I thought that was a great story.
I liked what you said about legends and just think what they now think about what he did, the little guitar lead that he did on Beat It. Okay. And how that stands out. And he did it. He didn't get credit for it. He didn't make a dime doing it because he wanted to play with another legend. Okay. And he put this thing together. He came down when Michael was kind of like taking a break. And he's like, yeah, I'll come into the studio for a half hour. And this is what he threw together.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
He threw that together.
Yeah.
And it's an insane lead.
And the other thing is the humility of Eddie Van Halen. He never wanted to be in the limelight. If you get the new Time, did you see the new Time Life magazine that came out, which pays homage to Van Halen?
No, I didn't even see that. No, I thought I didn't even think there was still a magazine.
Yeah,
they thought it was only online. But that's the thing about Van Halen and Eddie and Dave's relationship is that Dave was the front man. He brought everything in, and Eddie stood back. And then as time went on, you could see Eddie starting to come a little bit more in the forefront.
Yeah, and Eddie said it in the article in there. The whole magazine is devoted to Van Halen, and it said, Eddie would say, "Dave, you're the rock star, but I'm the musician," and that really encompasses who Eddie was. He didn't care about the limelight. He just he cared about the music. Dave cared about all the stuff that came with it, the girls and the fame, but Eddie didn't.
So did Eddie. He wasn't a quiet boy either.
No. I mean, Eddie was a partier, but he would have been a partier, I think, regardless of whether he was a rock star. He liked to drink and he liked to have fun, but he was, and he was. I'm sure he was with his share of women, but you could just tell by interviews with him, he really didn't care. He didn't go into music for that. He was, as you know, he was a very well-trained pianist by, that was the first thing he took with Alex. They were taught fundamentally in music because of their dad. So music was their life from when they were like very young, from they were like 5 or 6 years old. So they were really musicians. And then the fame came after, whereas David was just looking to be, hey, I want to be the life of the party, And that combination.
He's an entertainer, like you said. He was an entertainer. Do you have a favorite album?
For a Van Halen?
Yeah, you got to pick one Van Halen album. You're on a desert island. What are you picking?
Yeah, I go back and forth because they all kind of have like their own personality, which is great, which really was nice to see their evolution. I guess it would, wow. I don't know. I would almost say,
got to be balanced with Gary Strong.
Fair warning, but I would say Van Halen 1 was had the most raw music on it. It was just raw. It was unbridled. It was before music started getting commercialized. I just feel like there were no songs on there that were, I mean, like Fair Warning had Push Come to Shove. Like, why is that even on the album? Like, I never got, like, that was a weird song for them.
Van Halen 1 was recorded the way they did their live set. And that's the way they wanted it. Do you know it was recorded, I believe, in 3 or 4 days, the whole album.
Yeah, and I have
2
some demos.
overdubs, and that's it.
I have the early demos that Gene Simmons had put. If you can find them on YouTube, Gene.
Yes, I've heard them.
Demo. And you see the crux of the music before they even produced it, and then when you hear it produced, it's like it's just sounds so perfect. But it's all there, early on, before they came out with that album. All those songs were there. And they were all really strong. And then when they produced it, just the sound in that album is when you think of hard rock music and guitar, I think of that album.
Sure. Do you have a favorite Van Halen album?
Yeah, I go Women and Children first with David Lee Roth, and then I go For Unlawful Common Knowledge with Sammy.
That's a great one. Those are great ones.
How about you?
See, man. If I'm going to go favorite one with Sammy, I got to go 5150. I love Dreams and Why Can't This Be Love? Love Walks In, 3 of my favorite songs. And I still think Van Halen 1 there is not a clunker on the bunch. No. Every song is great. And you know something? The beginning part, the very first song, what's the song where
Running with the Devil?
Right, okay. Running with the Devil. Okay, right. And how it has like the horns at the beginning? That was actually Gene Simmons' idea. And it was them in their cars blowing their horns. And then in the studio, they slowed it down. And that's what that sound is. And I just think it's such a great, everything about the album, the creativity, the songwriting. I love the diversity. You have your blues songs, you have your heavy songs, and my favorite song off of it is Little Dreamer, man. It is a great song. I can never get enough of it. So I'm going to go Van Halen 1 with Dave and 5150 with Sammy.
And one thing I love about Van Halen too is people don't realize that every band has a million years to write their first album. And that's why the first album always seems to stick out. Yeah. But Van Halen 2 is a goddamn great albm. They did not have a bad album.
Sean, you made fun of Van Halen 3 with Gary Cherone. It's not a terrible album.
Yes, it is.
I've never heard it.
It's not terrible. No, it's not. Without You is a great song.
Yeah, it's not great.
I never heard the album.
Yeah, don't bother.
I was so upset about another singer. I was like, I can't get on board.
Yeah, he got a bad rap. He really did.
He got a bad rap, is right. He's a good singer. He was a guy from Extreme. You remember Extreme, right? Yeah. Only Words.
Okay.
I don't know about you guys with the concerts, but my first big concert was seeing David Lee Roth and Van Halen in 1984, and that tour. And I saw them in New Haven. I slept out all night to get the tickets with my friend Kenny Lee. And we went, and I remember I brought my little Instamatic camera to take pictures. We were like 10 miles away from the stage, and it didn't matter. You're just like, I got to get a glimpse of the stage. And some idiot behind me, when I went to take my first picture, vomited all over my back. All over my back, got on my arm, got on my camera, and I got the pictures developed. And every picture, it was the picture, and the top corner of the picture was blocked. It was covered. And I realized that was the guy's vomit that got on the lens.
That I saw Van Halen. I saw him with Dave and I saw him with Sammy. And I saw them with Dave as the support act for Black Sabbath on the Technical Ecstasy tour.
What?
Yeah. As a little kid in 1978.
David Lee Roth
and Van Halen were the support act. They were the opening act for Black Sabbath.
What was that like? Where'd you see them?
Madison Square Garden.
And how were they?
Oh, let me tell you something. It was amazing right from the beginning. Like I knew the Kinks cover that they did. You Really Got Me. So I knew that going in. But they opened with, that was their opening song. I think they opened with No, Eruption came. It wasn't their opening song. I'm sorry. It was Running with the Devil. That was the opening song, and then they went into Eruption and into. So those are the first three songs. They were great right from the very beginning. It was one of the craziest concerts I've ever been to. And
I would have killed to have gone to that show, but I don't think I would have been able to get on a bus at 2.
No, I was a little kid. I remember these big biker type guys took our seats, and we were like in junior high school. And I told my cousin, I was like, Joe, it's like, tell them to get out of our seats. He's like, I'm not going to go over to those guys. Like, no, tell them, those are our seats. He goes, you tell him. I go, Joe, we wound up all pussying out. And then remember back in the day, like no one enforced seats. So if you found open seats, you grabbed them. We went a few rows down and we wound up getting better seats. And then I did the sleepover thing for 5150. And I remember seeing them, and that was a sick concert too.
Well, how about this? I go to the Comedy Cellar. It was like 10 years ago. And I was down there hanging out one night, and I'm like, I want to watch. They let me downstairs to watch the show, and I'm sitting there. I go, they go sit over there on that little bench. When you walk, you go in, take a left, sit on the bench inside the room. So I go in the room. I'm sitting there, and on stage is Dove Davidoff, and sitting on the bench next to me, not facing me. I'm looking at the stage, and then there's someone next to me facing the stage, kind of like on the side of me, but not looking at me. And I'm like, that's David Lee Roth. David Lee Roth was sitting right next to me watching the show at the Comedy Cellar. And I'm like, I was literally started sweating. I got so nervous. And I was like thinking, like, why is he here? And it turned out that Dove Davidoff owns a building that he rented to David Lee Roth. And David Lee Roth was his tenant. And him and Dave were friends. And Dave would come down to watch Dove do stand-up. And the whole time I just wanted to, I wanted to just touch him on the shoulder and be like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, I love your work. I couldn't even do it. It was like a nightmare and a dream where like there's a bad guy who's right in front of you in the dark. And if he hears you, he's going to kill you. I couldn't even get the words out. I was so starstruck by David Lee Roth. And all I did was try to laugh loud so he would hear me laugh.
I think his uncle owns the club next door. You know, Cafe Wa?
Yeah, his uncle owned that, I think, right?
Yeah. So when they did their comeback album in 2012, they did a couple of secret shows over there.
Another time I had all these almost meetups with David Lee Roth. I was working and I was 25, and I when I got out of college, and I was up in Boston, and I didn't have a job, and me and all my friends would bounce at all these nightclubs. So I was working at a club called Axis, which is a very popular, famous kind of nightclub in Boston on Lansdowne Street. And David Lee Roth in 1995 was coming there to play with his no-name band, and he was interviewed that morning on radio, and there were a bunch of no-name guys. And he was coming there to play in 1995. It's not that long. Okay. It's 11 years after 1984. And Dave and they let me, he was playing where I worked. So I got to go for free, and I'm standing like 7 feet away from the stage. There's probably about maybe 100 people in the room, maybe 150. And Dave comes out, and it was like, it wasn't the Dave that I knew. It wasn't Apache Indian with the feathers and the long hair. Short hair Dave. He didn't even move around. He tried to throw his leg up in the air. And it was like, I was like, oh my God. Like, I remember people were standing next to me kind of making fun of him. And I felt like so hurt and angry, like, how dare they make fun of David Lee Roth, you know? And at the time, he was probably only about, he was probably about almost 39 years old. He wasn't that old, but he looked like an old man on stage. There, all of that allure that he brought with him in the early 80s was gone. And I remember feeling sad, really sad. And he went off to his room, and I didn't get a chance to meet him. But
just think, a 40-year-old David Lee Roth is like an 89-year-old everybody else.
Yeah.
Like all that life that he crammed in up until 40 years old really catches up pretty quick.
And that's what it was. He lived so hard, you know, and even now he's he I'll tweet to David Lee Roth, and he does he paints now. You guys know that?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And I always tweet to him and say, "Oh, I love your paintings." And I would love to hang out with that guy because he's a very bright man. He's neurotic. He's so intelligent. He's so quick-witted. Sometimes he goes off on these tangents. I have no idea what he's talking about, and that's because he'll say like he's hyper and his mind is always moving, and maybe the drugs is also kind of taking him out of always making sense. But he is just such a enigmatic person. You know, he's a guy that he's just fascinating to me.
So basically, what it comes down to, Bob, is 40 years later, you still want to fuck David Lee Roth.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
On that note, Sean, Bob, this was a cool hang, man. Thank you so much for joining us, man. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. We don't get to talk about music unless we find there's only certain people you can kind of sit with and talk music like this with and really get into the nuts and bolts. So I enjoyed it because I don't really get a chance to talk about this with a lot of people. They have no idea what I'm talking about. You can say, the album was good, but they're not going to get into, you remember that lick that he did? Remember the thing he said? But tonight, go hear about it later on YouTube. And there's 3 songs in a row, or just watch that song by itself, and then watch Unchained, 1981 Oakland. And that's the Van Halen I had a crush on.
1981 Oakland, hear about later.
Yes.
Okay.
Jeff's going to write it down because he can't.
I have to
remember.
write it. I'm going to forget. Bob, once again, thank you so much for coming out and doing this, man. We really do appreciate it. Anything going on? Anything you have you would like to let people know about? You have a website. People can come visit you.
You know, I'm just if anyone wants to follow me on Twitter, I'm very active on there at Bob DiBuono, BobDibuono. And I'm going to be hopefully, once we get back with the clubs opening, I want to record my first album, which I've never recorded. And I want to record an album. And that was never a big interest to me, recording albums. But now, with, everything, I have stuff on Sirius they play, and I'm like, I got to really update the stuff. And now I'm excited to record an album. I was such a perfectionist for many years. I never felt like it was good enough. And now I'm like, I think I have a body of work that I can be proud of and just get it out there. So I think that's the thing I'm going to work on over the next couple of months, is putting out the first live album and finding the location to record it in. Have you guys done that yet?
Sure. You have an album, right?
I've recorded 3. I never released any of them, because one I did very early on. I was way too obnoxious and green. And the second one, it was like 2 years later, and I'm like, oh, this is horrible too. A couple of years ago, I actually pressed them. I did those little digital download cards. And looking back on it still, I was just like, no. But I'm in the same exact boat. Right now, I am ready to go in front of 100 people, bang out 2 shows, do an hour a piece, do all this material that is good and it's solid. And you're such a different comedian than you were 5 years ago and 10 years ago, that even though a lot of the new stuff is really good, you still have some great stuff from back in the day, really, really good, and you really want it out there. So I'm in the same boat. I definitely can't wait till April or May to really lock this down and do an hour to put out there.
And I was such I'm very OCD. I'm always oh, it's not ready. And it's at the end of the day, people are churning out stuff all the time, and it's mediocre, but it doesn't matter because that stuff gets chopped up. It's on Sirius. And if anything, you're making money. And I get money on the little stuff that I did, and they're playing that all the time. I'm like, I just got to put an album so I have stuff. My jokes are out there playing because there's a lot of good material. And I was so worried about the whole package, the album. And it's at the end of the day, no one's listening necessarily. Yeah, they may buy the album and download it, but a lot of it they're just going to hear chopped up if they're listening to Sirius. Right. And you just want those jokes out there to be played before someone else does those jokes, and they're yours.
That's happened too.
Yeah.
All right, fellas. This was a great one. Bob, we wish you a happy new year. We wish, Sean, if I don't see you, I'm wishing you a happy new year. Our producer, Adam Holtz, will wish him a happy new year. Our sometimes talent coordinator, Mike, who sometimes gets us guests and sometimes don't, wish him the best. And we'll see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.
Take care, bye. See you later, guys.
Bye.